So I can hear my own voice, but can you hear it in the back? It's on. Now, yeah, there it is. Now I can hear it. Okay, I just don't want to mess this up for the performer because it's already set up. So my name is Josh Joella, and I'm the artistic director here at Stories on Stage, so welcome, thank you for coming. The first thing I want to ask you is how many of you are first-time comers to Stories on Stage? Good note for the Joella and Anna stories. That's a lot of new faces. So for their nerves, that's good to know. People come out. They want to see your stories. Don't be nervous. You're good writers. All writers have this problem thinking that they're not good writers and that they don't deserve everything that they get. It's unfortunate, but it's just a problem in our community. So, technical things. There are exits along this wall and the way you came out, or came in. Should something occur that you need to flee the building, that's the best route. You'll be out in the parking lot. We've never had that happen before, but I gotta say. With cell phones, that's the thing that we usually have, and that's a problem. So turn them off, please. If there's something so dire that you just absolutely have to know about it, because Kim Kardashian is just doing something tonight, and you got your alerts on. See, this is the right audience to make fun of Kim Kardashian. Not all audiences are. But so if you would please check your phones that they are on the absolute silentest. They are not going to disrupt the performance. They're not going to make me angry because I can hear them go off. Thank you. There are cookies in the back if you didn't already notice that. They are delicious cookies, and they are there for you. So, if you didn't get one yet, I'm so sorry. Now you'll be thinking about it for the first story. I'm so sorry to our first writer and actor, but they are back there, and at intermission you should get some. Now, on October 13th, we will have another event. It will be Friday the 13th Horror Night, because it's Friday the 13th in October. How could we not? Please come back for that. We'll be featuring the work of Jonathan Mumm. I think I have the right audience when I say that name out loud, but some of you will know who that is. If I say it to younger people, unfortunately, they didn't have the pleasure of Mumm at the movies on Channel 10, but Jonathan Mumm will be here. He's a horror writer, and so many people are like, Jonathan Mumm is a horror writer? He is. He's got novels, and movies, in fact, that he's written and directed, and he's coming for Horror Night. And for all of my nervous writers out there, you're all waiting for, like, what is he going to say? Submissions are now open for Stories on Stage Sacramento. That makes it sound like they weren't open before, but they are now open in a regularized button on our website way that is at the top instead of somewhere else where it used to be. And we really are looking forward to all of you nervous writers creeping out of your little writer caves and putting something out there that maybe we might like, because we probably will. So please, with submissions open, inundate us. Thank you. I heard someone out there. I heard a secret writer voice. But seriously, because we're putting together 2024, and we need submissions because that's what we do. We have writers who are read by professional actors. Without the writers, the whole foundation collapses. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Betsaida LeBron, who will be reading the work of Joella Aragón tonight for us. Thank you.
So this story was originally published in the fall 2022 issue of Under the Gum Tree. She sighed, heavy and loud, then pushed the kitchen door open with her wide, soft hips. Mild breezes from the McCall River floated across the dining room table, dancing the edges of the blue checker tablecloth. Stewed chicken, rice, beans, and corn tortillas would be ready in an hour for the midday meal. My 3 brothers, my sisters, and I were hungry. Always hungry. Our grandmother chopped, cut, boiled, and fried up our meals morning, noon, and night. We kids ate everything in sight, while our mother grew thin. Her hips, once curvy, grew razor sharp through her white cotton slip. From the moment our plane landed in British Honduras, Mother stopped speaking to her children. And once we moved into grandmother's house, she rarely left her room, where she sat at the edge of the bed, smoking. 9 months earlier, the Vietnam War raged as my father drove Marie, our blind, sick mother, my brothers Douglas, Roberto, and Freddie, my sister Annie, and me to the airport. We were being sent to live with his mother in the hot-as-hell tiny village of Santa Elena, across the Hawksworth Bridge from the twin village of San Ignacio. We had no other choice. He had no other choice but to send us away. Social workers knocked on our door every week asking the same questions. What will you do with your children while you're away in Vietnam? Who will look after them? Marie was blind, but her sense of smell was keen. She knew people by the scent of their skin, whether she saw them every day or every few years. She'd crank her neck, tilt her head, and her face would light up with knowing. Yet she couldn't care for herself or her young children, who at the time ranged in age from 4 to 12. At 9, I was the middle of 5. I didn't tell my parents how terrified I was to leave everything I knew behind. My home, my friends, and school. I had already learned by example from my older brother and sister who kept to keep my worries to myself. I wouldn't share my fears with Grandma Ella either. With 6 more people under her roof and our mother of no help with us kids, she was always busy, always doing, cooking, cleaning, sewing, endless piles of laundry, overseeing our schoolwork, mediating our squabbles. My grandmother's thick fingers rummaged through her remnant basket, scraps of brown and blue and floral cloth. "This will work," she said, waving a piece of fabric the size of a loaf of fresh bread in my face. "Listen to me, child." She gently cupped my chin with her palm. "I spoke to Teacher Zunger today. She tells me Carlos Diaz tricked you on the playground again. He says the boys tease you about your mother, and you punched him on the playground. This time Carlos's mother came to school to complain, and she insists you apologize." "But Carlos started it. He starts every fight and gets away with it." "Don't whine." Mamacita Ella wiped my tears away with her calloused fingers. "I'm not whining," I whimpered, wiping my nose with my shirt sleeve. "I'm just trying to tell you what happened. Besides, teacher says we should always tell him if something bad happens out in the schoolyard." "No one wants to hear your problems. Not the nuns, the teachers, or anyone else, even if they say they do. To survive this life, you must learn the power of sweet, secret revenge. I'm going to teach you how to make an obia doll. Obia magic will save you." She smoothed the brown scrap of cotton cloth on the dining room table and then dug in her dress pockets for a chunk of yellow chalk. "Don't just stand there. Joella, come closer. Watch what I do." My heart pounded against my ribs. Afraid I was having an 8-year-old heart attack, I grabbed my chest and twisted my shirt. Hot tears flowed down my cheeks and onto my lips. I licked them away with the tip of my tongue. "This is not the time for fear," she said. "Fear will cripple you. Watch me. First, draw the doll's head, then the torso, arms, legs, and feet, in that order. Her fingers tightened around silver scissors. Next, cut out the body. The efficient snip, snip, scratch filled the quiet corners of the dining room. The Caribbean sun was gentle that day. We were alone in the dining room where she worked her magic with scraps of cloth. As was so often, Mother was in her bedroom, staring into the blackness. My siblings were in the backyard playing, waiting for the midday meal. I could hear their distant chatter and the sing-song of the neighbor's radio. Your doll shouldn't be any bigger than this. She tapped a wooden ruler gently on the tip of my nose. Now, continue where I left off. She instructed in handing me the scissors. Then stitch the body together like I taught you. Don't forget to leave an opening at the top of its head to stuff your Joella doll with more scraps of cloth, and tie the neck with twine and sew 2 green buttons on its face for eyes. I have work to get back to in my sewing room. Mrs. Espinosa's burial dress needs to be completed by early tomorrow. Mamacita Ella sighed. Her eyes drooped and tired. A permanent frown tugged at the corners of her mouth. The money from your father isn't enough to feed and clothe this family. Believe me, child, I'd rather sip hot tea and relax on the porch swing. But I have a sewing business to run, and we need the money. She rubbed her thumb and 2 fingers together. I threaded the needle the way Grandma Ella had taught me, stiffening the thread with a dab of spit, placing the right sides of the fabric together to make a clean seam so the rough edge would be hidden on the inside. I plucked up the weave on the cloth with the point of my needle over and over again. Don't be lazy, I told myself, as I formed a stitch and then tugged the thread through, struggling to keep each new stitch even and tidy as the one before. Do it right. Pull your work out and start over again if you must. Frayed edges and crooked stitches must never be seen. Take pride in your work. My grandmother's instructions echoed in my ears. When I finished the doll's body, I twisted the end of the thread between my index finger and thumb to tie the final knot and snipped the excess thread. I chose 2 shiny green buttons from an old cookie can and sewed them to my Joella doll's face. Stuffed my doll and tied twine around her neck. Proud of my handiwork, I raised my doll to the ceiling and danced to the salsa music that wafted through the window. I swung her high and in circles above my head. Mamacita Ella walked into the dining room and caught me swaying to the music with my Joella doll in my arms. She snatched it from me with a force that stung worse than a slap in the face. Treat Joella magic with respect, she hissed. It's not a toy. No one must ever know you're an Joella child. You follow me? She shoved the doll into my chest. Burning with shame, I followed. My grandmother managed her sewing business out of her bedroom at the front of my house. My favorite place to perch was on a small wooden footstool near her Singer sewing machine, stitching buttonholes on shirts and listening, wrapped to her stories. The entire village knew her sewing expertise. As a child, I believed she was famous, and perhaps in that village she was. Go to Mama Ella's house before the baby shows. She'll make a wedding dress for you. She knows how to keep a secret. She would pump her sewing machine pedal and sing while she stitched. I could still hear her words. Need to earn a nickel, need to earn a dime, food on the table, a stitch in time. If a person needed a garment in 2 days, she pumped the pedal faster, moving specialty dresses like baptismal gowns or fancy suits for men beneath the needle with amazing speed and control. I knew the light burned in her bedroom at all hours of the day and night. The more pressure she was under to finish a suit, burial, or wedding dress, the faster she worked. And or so it seemed to me, the more stories she told. I must have stitched hundreds of plastic pearls on wedding gown lace while I listened to my grandmother's stories. With a cup of hot tea in her hand, she stared out her window at the glowing kerosene lamp coming from the house next door. "Tell me a story," I would whisper. The sewing machine would begin to hum. Her voice would grow guttural and low, and as she pushed wedding gown silk beneath the needle and quickly hemmed a blue floral dress, she would begin. "Your great-grandmother, Feliciana Viana, was kidnapped by a Guatemalan soldier over 60 years ago." "My great-grandmother was kidnapped?" I would murmur wide-eyed. "Yes," she said with a glance and a sly smile my way. "A Guatemalan soldier rode his horse onto the land where she lived with her husband and child. The horse's front legs pawed hot, sticky air. Feliciana stared at the stranger in horror, her mouth gaped open, dust burning his eyes. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The soldier snatched her away in a whirlwind of dust. Feliciana paused too long when she should have run, like the wind in a storm. In the seconds it took for her to wonder what she should do, the soldier had lifted his leather riding crop high above his head and snapped it around her legs. Her face hit the ground and blood poured from her mouth. The soldier, leaning over the side of his horse and twisted Feliciana's black braid around his thick brown hands. He pulled her up onto his horse. Her screams were carried away with the speed of the horse and the matching speed of the wind. Feliciana Viana was never seen again. "Tell me more," I begged. I always begged for more. Completed jobs hung on hangers ready to be tried on in a makeshift fitting room, complete with a full-length mirror and raised platform to stand on. A tuck here, a snip of thread, shorten the hem, tick in the waist. A parade of customers collected their precious new dresses and suits, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. Smiles radiated satisfaction as they handed me crisp British Honduran banknotes carrying the face of Queen Elizabeth. "Your grandmother is much admired in this town," a city council member smiled as he admired his new black silk suit. "She's a member of the town judicial council, you know. No one messes with your grandmother." He tousled my hair. I was proud to be her granddaughter and felt her success was also my own. As the moon began to rise, Mamacita Ella lit 10 hurricane candles in the windowsill, and on the nightstand next to her bed, shadows danced on her sewing room walls. I hugged my dog close while the lemony scent of candles tickled my nose. She shuffled her feet from side to side to cumbia music from the radio in her bedroom and began to chant, low in her throat, then thunderously loud. She clapped. She laughed. She gyrated her hips. She plucked a needle from her pincushion and held it in the red, hot candle flame. "Set your Obeah doll here." She pointed to a small metal table beside her sewing machine. Still swaying to the music, she rammed her hot needle into my Obeah doll's heart. "Oh, great spirit," she cried out. "Help my granddaughter find the courage to protect herself. Work your Obeah magic." She held the needle to the flame again and stuck it in my doll's neck. Fear gripped my gut. Bile burned my throat. I stumbled back against the wall. Mamacita Ella's bare feet pounded the mahogany floor. Oh, great ancestors, I call on you to protect my granddaughter. She must learn courage in order to survive. I was timid at first, unwilling to dance. And then an unfamiliar power, burning hot like the Caribbean sun, coursed through my body. My movements began to match my grandmother's. Our pounding feet grew thunderously loud. We laughed. Our fists pummeled the stagnant air. My grandmother's body moved, nimble and free. Oh, great spirits, she shouted. You are in us, and we in you. Guide us. Show my granddaughter the wisdom of her own power. We danced side by side. Though I was only a child, I understood we were becoming one with the spirits of our past. When Carlos asks you why your mother is blind, tell him it's none of his business. Run home, stick a hot needle in your Obeah doll's right eye. He'll stumble into town screaming with pain. Pus will ooze from his eyes, my grandmother said, cackling. Don't turn your eyes from me, she grabbed my chin and forced me to look into her eyes. If you let that boy get away with harassing you, he'll do it again. She blew hot breath on another needle, passed it through the red flame, then jabbed it into the Obeah doll's knees. Grandma Ella beckoned me with her index finger. She stuck the needle into the doll's stomach. Rhythmic dance pulsated inside me from the place where I knew my female ancestors lived. We danced the dance of sweet, secret revenge. Now, you do it, she demanded, holding the needle out for me to pluck from her fingers. You must learn to protect yourself. No one can do this for you. Pounding rain poured down, flooding the streets. Dogs howled in the distance. My heart raced. Sweat, peppery and bold, seeped from my body, mixing with the lemony candle scent. Will I go to hell if I use Obeah magic? I asked, holding back tears. No, child. Hell is a myth. You are gathering strength, courage, wisdom, and protection from the long line of your female ancestors. Cautious at first, I clutched the needle, then held it to the flame. Breathe, my grandmother said. Just breathe. You are strong. You can do this. You must do this. I rammed that hot needle into my Obeah doll's heart. My courage grew like the waves of a hurricane. With every thrust of the needle into my Obeah doll's heart, head, arms, and knees, I became strong and free. Over and over, I thrust the needle into my doll's body. If the boy in your class puts his foot out to trip you, his knees will buckle with pain. If he changes his ways, forgive him. If he continues to call you a prissy little white girl or laughs because your mother is blind, stick the needle in your doll's left eye. Mamacita blew out the last candle in her sewing room, then pulled me close. Obeah magic will protect you if you respect it. Use its powers only when necessary. Otherwise, heartache and pain will follow you the rest of your life. Now hurry, we have a burial dress to finish. You're coming with me. I am? I'm no longer strong enough to dress the dead by myself. I need your help to turn the body. Mrs. Espinosa must be perfect for the end-of-life celebration. The following evening, yellow kerosene lamps shone in Mrs. Espinosa's window. Rice and beans simmered on the stove. Bottles of rum were lined up like soldiers on the table in the kitchen. My grandmother and I washed Mrs. Espinosa's body with warm soapy water. We turned her body, slipped the burial dress over her head and shoulders, and covered her body. Her lips were painted red. Rose-colored powder covered her cheeks. When family arrived to pay their respects, she rested in peaceful repose on the dining room table, perfect, as Mamacita had said she must. A musician played the banjo on the veranda, and another steel drums. Glasses of rum were passed. Children and adults laughed and told stories until morning. The Macaw River sparkled under starlight and the dangling moon. Iguanas languished on branches. A lone monkey snatched its arm while sitting in a mango tree. Long after the mourners had departed, Mamacita Ella and I walked home under full moonlight, happy and exhausted. She kissed the top of my head and reached for my hand. Mrs. Espinosa taught me Obeah magic when I was a young woman. Before she died, she said I must pass the magic on to you because you understand. A few days later, Carlos Diaz teased me again. White girl, prissy little white girl, you think you're better than us? You're not. Your mama is blind. Your mama is crazy, Carlos laughed. Carlos called me that because I'm light-skinned compared to my darker-skinned brother and my Belizean Creole father. In that small village, we were different. People often stared and asked questions. Father's heavy Creole accent and my mother's blindness brought unwanted attention wherever we went. Why is your father's hair so kinky? What's wrong with your mother's eyes? Why won't she talk? Asshole! I'm gonna tell teacher, I screamed at Carlos. And then I fell silent as a small but mighty voice whispered in my head, no one will save you. You must save yourself. After school, I ran home, set my Obeah doll on the dining room table and lit 5 candles. My arms flailed. My body rocked. I passed a shiny, hot needle through the red, hot flame. Oh, great spirit, help me find the courage to protect myself. I want Carlos to stop teasing me, I chanted. I rammed and jammed and pushed that hot needle into the Obeah doll's knees and eyes. With the force of the Caribbean storm, the kitchen door slammed shut, flew open, then shut again. I grabbed onto the edge of the kitchen table, afraid I had felt the force of the devil himself. The next day, Carlos wasn't in school. I heard he had tripped over his feet crossing the Hawksworth Bridge on his way to school, that he fell, tore a hole in the knee of his pants, that blood seeped out of his eyes, and that he screamed in sorrowful pain. I laughed out loud with that tattletale children who told me the story. A week later, there was a knock at the front door. Peering through the screen, I spied Carlos and his mother on the veranda. He held a platter covered with a white dish towel. His white shirt was tucked into his starched school pants, his hair wet from a shower. He and his mother looked like they were on their way to mass. Carlos still had a white cotton patch over his eye, and we stared at each other through the screen. He with one good eye, both of us as speechless as my mother. His mother gave him a gentle shove. Go on, she said. We made these tamales for you and your family, Carlos said. I'm sorry I said those mean things about you and your mother. I hadn't noticed, but Mamacita Ella hovered just behind me. She pushed the screen door open and beckoned Carlos and his mother inside. As they passed, Grandma Ella narrowed her eyes at me. I widened mine, as if I didn't understand what she wanted. She pinched my waist. I'm sorry too, Carlos, I mumbled. My grandmother cleared her throat. I mean, I'm sorry I punched you in the stomach. Joella, Mamacita Ella said, taking the platter of tamales from Carlos. Put these on the dining table and call the rest of the family to eat. Tell them we have company. You'll join us, won't you? She asked, turning to Carlos's mother with a wide smile. Come, I said to Carlos, help me find my brothers and sister. You know Freddie, right? I think he's in the backyard, but first I have to bring my mother to the table. Together, Carlos and I walked past the table, heavy laden with fresh tamales, stewed chicken, rice, beans, tortillas, and a cool pitcher of lime juice, and into my mother's dim-lit, smoke-filled room. Take her hand, Carlos, I said. Help me guide her to the table. We can't let her fall down the stairs. Our three eyes met and held for a moment. I can't know what he saw in mine, but I was pretty sure Carlos wouldn't tease me anymore. Mamacita's Ella advised to never hold a grudge or heartache, and pain would follow me for the rest of my life, whispered near the edges of my mind. And at that young age, it was easy to forgive and still dance the dance of sweet, secret revenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsaida. Thank you, Joella. I think I'm looking at you, but the lights are very bright. There'll be a 15-minute intermission. Again, I remind you that there are cookies in the back. And then there was one other thing I was supposed to say, an executive director. Oh, yes. And in case you didn't realize this, and we forgot to tell you, there is a program for tonight, and the scannable QR code is on a sign back at the box office. So otherwise, we will see you in about 15 minutes. Thank you. So first of all, this is Under the Gum Tree for anyone who doesn't know this publication. It is writing from all over the English-speaking world and fine art. It is creative nonfiction to tickle the writers in the room. This is the very publication in which the last story was published, this very one that's going to be for sale in the back, $20. The managing editor of Under the Gum Tree, who also happens to be our former director, one of our former directors here at Stories on Stage, is in the back to do it. So you can say hello to Dorothy. She will take your money and in exchange for that money, give you a copy of this with Joella's story in it. We didn't even know this was going to happen. This is wonderful for us. So they're in the back for after the performance. Next up, we have a story, I shouldn't have said that. Stories, Flash, by Anna Cotham, read by Kellie Rains, and that's all I'm going to say.
Pattern by Anna Cotham. This story was originally published October 11th, 2019 by Everyday Fiction. This blanket would be unmemorable, except you recognize this as your favorite pattern. And remember where, still new to knitting needles, you used to drop stitches and clumsily fix them up. Your fingertips know this sturdy, not so soft yarn without touching it. You know this color, blue gravel. Remember having chosen it for both its less childish hue and the potential to hide lesser stainings. Yes, this blanket is your handiwork, you confirm, as the detective drapes it across the table. But not saying that you've done this pattern many times since, improving and embellishing each time, sometimes with better quality yarn, certainly with better skill. This one here was one of your first, might have been the first of many you'd made for foster kids. Children in need and trouble and trauma. Children you knew you'd never meet but might appreciate your handmade and heartfelt donation. A blanket would be among their few possessions, something small and warm that they could carry from home. to home. Spread out under the lights, the color has clearly faded after 6 years. There are pulls and scorch marks. When you see one silly yellow knit flower at one corner, you remember that you'd added silly yellow flowers to all the corners. A smiling teddy bear fabric patches sewn into the upper quadrant. On the other side, the teddy bear clings to a ladder of unraveling stitches. You did not add the teddy bear you feel compelled to mention. The blanket overall is not as worn as you thought it might be. A bit thin at the edges, but acrylic holds up. That's the point of acrylic. There's a momentary pull of pride in your craft before you realize by the smell that lack of washing contributed to its durability. And likely not washed at all, the detective mentions, since its owner aged out of foster care and turned, with nowhere else to go, to the shelters and streets. The detective mentions a few items found near the blanket at the scene. A couple tampons, a couple cigarettes, a romance novel with a torn condom wrapper inside, a damp sock. You picture the inventory. Think about what wasn't mentioned. Condoms, matches, the other damp sock. Next to the yellow flower, the blanket has a tag with the name of your volunteer knitting group. That tag was one of their few leads, the only thing with a name, the detective explains, and why you were contacted. As chapter leader, you naturally wanted to help. It is purely by chance that you are also the creator of this cold pile of soiled acrylic. Blue gravel is indeed dark enough to hide some stains, but not all. You explain that this is the way your group works. Produce stitch by stitch, deliver in anonymity, start again. What you cannot explain, the years, the money, the incipient arthritis, all in service of knitting and purling belief into every pattern. Because belief is tougher, shinier facade than hope. Because belief, more than hope, bears the weight of your generosity, your sense of purpose, past the urban street corners, the under freeways, the scorched earth lots where the transient camps grow season by season. You've let many blankets go. But no, you never meet the children. The detective thanks you and folds up the blanket with an expression that echoes as you say, one last time, one last time, one last time. Sorry, you don't know the blanket's owner. Sorry, you've wasted their valuable time. Sorry, but you can't help after all. Driving by Moonlight. This story was originally published June 1st, 2022 by Brilliant Flash Fiction, which awarded the story third place in its annual contest and also nominated it for a 2022 Pushcart Prize. Nobody likes Interstate 5. Like most, I tolerated it. But your greatest joy was putting pedal to the metal on the flattest stretch with no red lights ahead, no white lights behind. Halfway between Sacramento and the Grapevine at night, I-5 laid out before us like a wasteland invited. The full moon high and heavy like a cliche. You rolled down the windows and turned off the headlights. Fucking lunatic! I shouted through the wind. Turn them back on! We can see just fine. You laughed through my shouting, then relented. It had only been a minute, probably less. But it became tradition on each trip. Keeps you on your toes, you chortle. You have to trust the road you're on. No one trusts this road. What does that even mean? And I don't want to be on my toes. But your joy was infectious, and I'd hide a smile through each argument. A year into your diagnosis, I drove the whole way. You slept in the passenger seat. Your breathing shallow. Cars wove in, out, passing us by, moving onward. Dusk passed slowly through the kaleidoscope haze when everything became slightly more than three-dimensional. It was almost a relief when darkness sharpened and settled during the last stretch, interrupted by nothing but taillights and mileage signs. The music was low. The moon was full. All that could be said had been said. No more bullshit. No more memories. Then you whispered, "Roll down my window." I did. And you crept your fingers out to high-five the wind. They vibrated, thin and brittle as hair, as if they might snap off and fly away. You whispered something else, but facing away, your words carried off into the wind. I thought I understood you anyway. Words were becoming part of the past now, and I was holding on to every last one. Time to trust the road. Taking a breath, I turned off the headlights. The individual beams directly in front of our car disappeared. Just a moment of transition, a tremor, a terror. Then I fell back into the landscape. The same vastness as before, but different. The moon glowing over us, lighting up new shadows in the spare land. The intermittent caverns of hay and barns and housing. Your profile. Breathing it all in and out. The wind filling up the space between us. Untethered. This story was originally published by Brilliant Flash Fiction in their 2021 anthology, Branching Out. When I wake up 1 week later, the doctors tell me I am more famous than Jesus Christ. The churches are paying for my care. Pilgrims are encamped miles out. Media swarms the hospital, breaking through security. Because the first proven legitimate image of me is worth millions. For them, my sister's disappearance is exaltation, terror, confusion, salvation. For us, despair. The surgical slice of a God who saw fit to literally rip my twin away from our body minutes before our scheduled surgery, just to prove a point. What do you remember? The doctors and theologians ask. I say, counting down from 100, interlacing fingers, my tethered sister and I, that at 97, I realized she was squeezing goodbye. My sister, my spirit, the better half of this part of ourselves. That at 95, electricity blistered through me, bursting from my palms and soles like venomous dandelion fluff. That through descending anesthesia, I heard screaming, code blue, echoing as the medical staff that hadn't fainted rallied to my seizing torture, rapture, rapture, echoing, leaving me weighed down by the visceral terror of grief. all of our past nights. My sister and I had shared yin-yang dreams, flying and swimming, sun and moon, summer and snow. Every night now, I fly and fall for both of us, through clouds playing like dolphins, through storms of fish. In 1 year, I will be able to sleep on my other side. But it will never not hurt like hell. Chicken skin. This piece is dedicated to Anna's mother, Judy, who will deny everything. You pull the skin off the cooked rotisserie chicken from the grocery bag in your back seat because it's closest and grossest. The dog doesn't need it anyways. He's already shaped like a burrito. It's easy to ignore how it feels in your hand once the joy of rubbing chicken fat across an Acura's windshield overrides the terror of getting caught. You get into the groove of it, like conducting a symphony. No, like Daniel learning with Mr. Miyagi, and you whisper, wax on, wax off, motherfucker! As every inch of the windshield gets smeared. The Acura's parked mostly in shade, hidden just from whoever might walk over, like its owner. The asshole who cut you off and stole this parking spot had your goddamn blinker on. Smear on, smear off. You should finish the job. Flee the scene before you lose track of time. Which can happen when you start humming to yourself like you're doing now, in the way that also soothes you while getting stuck with needles. Like the one you just got so the dermatologist could remove a heart-shaped patch of your own scaly skin for a biopsy. Humming with your heart pulsing hard, no doubt because you are vandalizing a vehicle in the parking lot of a hardware store, but also because your heart hasn't stopped over-pulsing since you sat down in that office a couple of hours ago. Because it's that time again to check things out. But this time they might have seen something new, and this time they think they might look like it could be, and you have to hum hard back against the this time, is it this time, could it, might, it is it. A car door slams nearby. You freeze. Stop humming. Take stock of your surroundings at the time. This limp chicken skin in your hand, it's like it never belonged to a living animal in the first place. You stuff the skin back into the packaging and consider your artwork. Sunlight and shadow through the overhead branches contour the streaks in a Starry Night-esque swirl. It's good and greasy. But is it greasy and swirly enough? Here's the thing. If you get caught, it might as well be for a job well done. No sign of the owner yet. So maybe you have more time. Show that smirking owner what it means to mess with a day like yours. Show every smirking owner, each owner of something from somewhere past that you let go, what it means. You peek into your purse. What else do you have? Lipstick. You've got a cheap drugstore lipstick, an okay color called Ruby Rummy Rose. One that you suspect makes you look older in real life than you think you look in the mirror. But in the shape of a heart and an arrow that fills the driver's side window looks absolutely fucking fantastic.
Thank you. There are cookies. There's literature to buy. There are friends to talk to. We'll turn on the lights so no one trips. Thank you for coming, and we hope to see you on October 13th for Horror Night. Please don't be frightened of that. Horror is a really cool genre.